Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to SARCC's live stream for our Schuylkill Brave series. We are so excited to be back with this series once again in the 2022 calendar year. The Schuylkill Brave series is something that we started last year at SARCC in an effort to kind of realize the hard conversations that we were having as part of our social transformation mission and values in our community and embrace difficult conversations as a whole. I want to introduce this, our first discussion of the new series. And the topic for this year's Schuylkill Strong series session number 1 is being color brave. This is a fantastic place to start and an excellent build off of one of our series discussions last year, where we talked about the intersections of anti-racism work and sexual violence prevention and response work, and sort of the history of how those things came to be tied together in SARCC's understanding. I want to take just one moment to give a shout out and a huge thank you to Geisinger, St. Luke's, and the St. Luke's Miners campus for supporting the Schuylkill Brave and for supporting challenging discussions in our community. This particular session of the series was sponsored by St. Luke's and Geisinger St. Luke's, and we're so glad to have them back in as a second-year sponsor for the Schuylkill Brave discussion series. This is a series that reaches hundreds of people each year and really helps us to realize important topics and have hard conversations about them. And the motivation for the hard conversations that we have here at SARCC and in the community as a whole is really this belief and idea that if we are brave, if we can talk about difficult and challenging things, we are stretching ourselves, we're growing ourselves, and we're making our community stronger and safer because of it. So whether it's conversations about the founding part of SARCC's mission of preventing sexual violence and promoting healing, or the different intersecting topics that really connect to and support our mission-driven work, all of those conversations are going to make our community stronger, healthier, and safer. And we're really glad to have all 6 of the people who are watching us tune in with us today, and we want to add a few more and keep the discussion going. So we'll be watching the comments and the live stream, and we'll be sharing the resources that we have going on with us throughout our discussion today. And just a reminder that we have 3 other discussions coming up on brave parenting, on recognizing child abuse and reporting child abuse, and then a great conversation coming up during Pride Month in June, where we're going to talk about creating affirming spaces for LGBT identified individuals. I want to take just a moment to introduce the folks who I'll be interviewing today for our Color Brave series, and I'll let them just talk about and share a bit about themselves. So first, I want to introduce Ms. Christina Davis, and I am so absolutely pleased to have Ms. Davis joining us today. She's here through Strength, Love, and Motivation, and has recently served as a fantastic trainer for our SARCC staff on this same Color Brave topic. Ms. Davis, do you want to share just a little bit about some of your background and what brought you to the discussion today?
Hi, good afternoon. Again, as Ali said, I'm very happy to be here. And Ali said most of it. I'm a facilitator and a trainer with Strength, Love, and Motivation. I am a retiree from adult education, from professional development. So this is another phase of my life. Color Brave was a workshop that we put together, and Alicia will further talk about that. But that brought me here because I participated and helped facilitate that workshop. And as Ali said, talking about difficult conversations is something we must do, and I'm just hoping to aid in that.
And then our other presenter and interviewee today is someone who is famous in our office in Schuylkill County. So right by the Dunkin' Donuts on the Pottsville-Minersville Highway, you'll find the SARCC office for Schuylkill County. And I like to call it SARCC North, but one of our longtime our longest lasting sexual assault counselor advocate at SARCC, and a fantastic aspiring ally in anti-racism and anti-oppression work, Alicia Rothoski. Alicia, do you want to talk a little bit about some of your background, what brought you into the discussion today?
I have been at SARCC for almost 11 years. And before that, I volunteered at SARCC. And before that, I worked in victim services as well. So, have an extensive background in providing supportive services to crime victims. I have personal and professional interest in the topic of anti oppression. And it's a topic that I feel is always in progress. And it's kind of nice when something, and I tell my clients this, it's always nice to be a works in progress because we have fewer expectations, and therefore, like, we can be okay with where we're at, but we can also strive to be better. So that's kind of where I'm coming from as a counselor advocate in this discussion.
Okay, well, that's awesome. And our first question today, we just want to give folks a little bit of a background. How did we come to be talking about this color brave topic in the Schuylkill Strong series? Alicia, would you be able to just expand a little bit on where and how the idea for this workshop came in?
Sure. So we have had some anti-oppression discussions and trainings in the past few years at SARCC. And while we're doing a good job, we could always do better. And I think that's at one point we're going to show a graphic about equality and equity. And I kind of feel like that's like our whole process here is like, okay, we're doing good. How can we do things better? How can we do things how can I do things as a counselor advocate that makes my clients' experiences better? How can our communication specialists do things better as a communication specialist? How can we all be better as not just professionals but as people as well? So when I really sat down with staff and we're having these really difficult conversations and about things that make us feel uncomfortable, because I am a firm believer that uncomfortability brings upon growth. Again, it's the counselor advocate in me here talking. So we had sit down conversations. And when I was listening to coworkers and people in the community and friends and family about certain topics, I sort of was able to place a I think we had some issues with color blindness because I heard a lot of people saying, well, I don't see color. It's no big deal. I treat everybody the same. And I don't think it's I don't think it's ill-intended thought process, but it can have some ill consequences. And so Allie and I had conversations about what sort of anti-oppression, like what kind of conversation do we need at this office? What sort of training do we need? What sort of discussions do we need to have? And I said to Allie, I think kind of where we struggle, not just as an office, again, works in progress always, but also just as a community, is how can we get past this idea of color blindness? And that's where Christina has kind of helped us with the training, and we got a lot out of the training. And it was the first time I heard of the concept of color brave, and I just absolutely love this conversation and definition of color brave.
And I think SARCC is a very great organization. And as Alicia said, what their mission is, because the first step to solve a problem is to not hide from it. And by them reaching out to us and reaching out to try to improve things, it showed they were not trying to hide from it. Because we have to take the first step to any form of action is also awareness. And as she says, uncomfortable, that's something we all must learn, to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Because these conversations for many are very uncomfortable. So we have to learn to be comfortable with that. And through this workshop, we wanted to share and try to increase awareness on the subject, increase your knowledge and understanding, as well as providing a safe place for the staff to share their experiences and their thoughts. And I think that's exactly what happened.
It definitely did. And we still are having those conversations here at our office.
Yeah, right, so we know the subject of race can be very touchy for some people. And we did talk about Melody Hobson's, her TED Talk that she did in 2014 about color brave. She actually coined that term, color brave. So we're going to show a few of her clips in a few minutes, and then we will have some discussion about that.
Right. So one of the things that just sticks out to me from what you both have shared is that difference between intent versus impact. And I feel like we talk about that a lot in our anti-oppression work at SARCC and in the community as a whole. Sometimes there's a huge difference between what people's intentions are. Usually
Right.
people come into conversations, interactions, relationships, and they have really good intentions. And sometimes there's a difference between the intention that people enter with and the impact that they can have. And the only way that we know about that or learn about that or grow from that is if we, as Ms. Christina said, if we don't hide from it and we seek to better understand and grow from our experiences and interactions.
Absolutely.
So I know we are going to show some of the clips from Melody Hobson's, it's a TED Talk, correct?
Yes.
Training. Are you ready for me to pull that up? Okay, here we go.
So it's 2006. My friend Harold Ford calls me. He's running for U.S. Senate in Tennessee. And he says, Melody, I desperately need some national press. Do you have any ideas? So I had an idea. I called a friend who was in New York at one of the most successful media companies in the world. And she said, why don't we host an editorial board lunch for Harold? You come with him. Harold and I arrive in New York. We are in our best suits. We look like shiny new pennies. And we get to the receptionist and we say, we're here for the lunch. She motions for us to follow her. We walk through a series of corridors, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in a stark room, at which point she looks at us and she says, where are your uniforms? Just as this happens, my friend rushes in. The blood drains from her face. There are literally no words, right? And I look at her and I say, now, don't you think we need more than one Black person in the US Senate? Now, Harold and I...
We're going to go forward to the next clip here.
Plan to talk about race, and they warned me. They told me, don't do it. There'd be huge risks in me talking about this topic, that people might think I'm a militant Black woman and I would ruin my career. And I have to tell you, I actually, for a moment, was a bit afraid. Then I realized the first step to solving any problem is to not hide from it. And the first step to any form of action is awareness. And so I decided to act.
I'm going to pause there. Do you want to comment on any of those first couple clips?
Allie, but can you go to the, skip the CEOs and go to the next two?
Okay.
Then I think it's time to comment.
Okay.
And I stand here today talking about this issue of racial discrimination because I believe it threatens to rob another generation of all the opportunities that all of us want for all of our children, no matter what their color or where they come from. And I think it also threatens to hold back businesses. You see, researchers have coined this term color blindness to describe a learned behavior where we pretend that we don't notice race. If you happen to be surrounded by a bunch of people who look like you, that's purely accidental. Now, color blindness, in my view, doesn't mean that there's no racial discrimination and there's fairness. It doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't ensure it. In my view, color blindness is very dangerous because it means we're ignoring the problem. There was a corporate study that said that Now, my favorite example of color bravery is a guy named John Skipper. He runs ESPN. He's a North Carolina native, quintessential Southern gentleman, white. He joined ESPN, which already had a culture of inclusion and diversity, but he took it up a notch. He demanded that every open position have a diverse slate of candidates. Now, he says the senior people in the beginning bristled, and they would come to him and say, do you want me to hire the minority, or do you want me to hire the best person for the job? And Skipper says his answers were always the same, yes. And by saying yes to diversity, I honestly believe that ESPN is the most valuable cable franchise in the world. I think that's a part of the secret sauce. Now,
Thank you, Allie.
Mm-hmm. So those were a series of just really powerful clips. I'm wondering your first reactions. What do you think we should take away from some of those clips from Melody Hobson's TED Talk?
I think one of the first things that we can take away is the difference and the contrast between color brave and color blindness. And she gave us a few examples. And again, she said being color brave means you having these conversations about race that can help us better understand each other's perspectives and experiences. That way we can make better decisions and secure better prospects for our future generations. She mentioned that. If we don't do it for ourselves, we need to do it for our children. And we have to think about not just the now, but the future for our children and our grandchildren. And she also pointed out that we have to be realistic, that we have race issues in our country, and we have to address them rather than pretend that they do not exist. So actually, color brave essentially means just speaking openly and honestly about race. And again, start to feel comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there are a few of the takeaways. And again, the contrast, your color blindness is just a word to deflect a mechanism to avoid dealing with the problem. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're avoiding the problem when we're saying color blindness. And like Alicia mentioned earlier during her introduction, some of her staff and others were saying, I don't see color. Okay? And they think that's okay, but it's not okay. Before I say anything further, I'm asking Alicia, what was the response when that was said, or what conversation did that, bring about?
Oh, that was a heavy-duty conversation that I attempted to have with somebody regarding that conversation. It didn't go as I wanted it to be honest with you. But it's like anything. When we ignore the problem, it doesn't go away. I mean, that's kind of the basis of like my job every day here is, if you ignore something bad, like very rarely does it disappear. Very rarely, do you just say, okay, like everything's okay because I'm ignoring this trauma.
Right.
Racism is traumatic. Like the basis of our work here is helping people go through trauma. So, to me, as a counselor advocate, that's just one of the many motivators of why this work is so important to us.
Right, good. And I think it's important when, it's easy for someone of a non-color to say, I don't see color, because it doesn't impact them the way it would of someone with color. They do not have to think about race every single day. They're not confronted with the reality of discrimination every single day. Mm-hmm. You have situations where, especially young Black men, every day they have to be concerned, I'm leaving my house, I'm not going to come back alive. I have been in a situation with my own children where we might be in a department store and, someone who's of age, excuse me, they clench their purse when they see my boys walk by, and so someone who says, I don't see color, or someone who's not, I'll say a white person, because they don't have to worry about that. And we have to think about that. I saw something, her name just escaped me. Oh, I know her name. But she asked raise your hand if you're willing to trade places with someone of color. She was talking to a group of, I can't remember her name, but anyway, no
Is that
one raised
Jane
their
Elliott?
hand. No one raised their hand.
Yeah.
No one in the audience raised their hand. No one raised their hand. But we need to think about that when you say you don't see color. You're robbing someone of their identity. You're robbing someone of their heritage. And sometimes it's very unintentional. You're not trying to cause harm. You're thinking, well, if I don't see color, then everything's good, everything's fair. No, you might feel that way and you might treat that person that way, but the rest of the world will not.
That was a question that that was kind of asked in our training, and it was a conversation piece later on amongst us, like, oh, ... like that speaks volumes. That speaks volumes.
I see there's a comment listed on there. I think the speaker you're looking for is Jane Elliott, who she's a nationally known speaker on topics of race and diversity, and is probably best known for her blue eyes, brown eyes exercise. She was originally an educator, and we were talking about that before we officially entered the stream today. Ms. Davis has a history as an educator as well, and teaching educators to do their work in the community. Do you have any, I'm going off script a little bit, any reflections from your history or past as an educator that would help the community as a whole embrace and understand this topic and this challenging topic in this day and age where it's extremely uncomfortable to do so out in the world?
I think, Allie, we're starting now because I think Alicia pointed out, we have to start talking about it. We have to start making others aware of the issue. Bring in life examples, but then there's a time when you stop talking about it and start implementing some action and doing something about it. But I think the first step is educating people. And I'm from an education background, but I think educating people, because some people just do not know, they're ignorant of the problem because they have blinders on. They have blinders on, they think everything's okay. And it's not, just like the equality and equity picture you had up there. And if you mind, can you put that back up there, Allie?
Sure.
Yes. Everyone does not require, or giving everyone the same resources is not going to help everyone. Just look at the picture here. We're not all the same height. We're not all the same. So I cannot give each of you a 4-foot block and say stand on it so you can see, because if you're not that tall to begin, it's not going to help you. And that's what this picture is reflecting. So I think educating people, number one, having these conversations, and then put a plan in action. You have to do something about it. Once we learn about it, now what are we going to do about it? And I think SARCC started because they wanted to be educated. They're working with a certain population. So now, because they receive some information, they can better probably communicate with their clients and with the people they're coming in contact with, and even their coworkers. So if everyone learn a little bit and then start spreading it and sharing it, that word would go out faster. Not go to a workshop and then keep everything in the workshop. I'm going home, not sharing anything about it. So educate yourself and then put a plan in action, start doing something about it.
That may be one of the things that was unexpected in starting some of our conversations around anti-racism and better understanding the unserved, underserved, and inadequately served communities in our area. As we started to better understand the issue, we started having some really challenging and almost like heartbreaking conversations among our staff talking about their own experiences. So a staff member who identifies as a person of color might talk about like what it feels like to walk into the courthouse, or how they question their experience of working through a meeting. And I think for those of us who are SARCC staff members who identify as white aspiring allies, it was really an eye-opening experience to start having those conversations about people we really care about and work next to every day.
And Allie, you said the right word, allies. Allies are needed from people of all colors, for all different type of people. And we need allies. So once you're educated in what's going on, and as you said, the realization set in, am I doing these things or am I not doing these things? That's some of being silent. As Alicia said, the problem will not go away. And sometimes being silent means I sustain. I agree. So we need allies. We had an example with one of the trainers, Alicia, you might remember, I think with Amanda was talking about a classroom situation where it was only this one person of color in the classroom. And then whenever the teacher would say something about slavery or whatever, she would look at this person, or she wanted that one person to expand on a conversation. But that person had allies in their classroom. So they came to that person's, I don't want to say defense, but they let the teacher know we all know something about it. Why just look at her? Or you have the situation where the teacher will not look at that person in the face. So you need allies. We all need allies. We need people to support us and to help get the word out. And the allies are the best ones to get the word out once they learn these things. Just like the opportunity the SARCC had in Schuylkill to attend this workshop. So I know these ladies and the gentlemen, they went out and shared what they learned. They went out and put it into practice. So now we just gained a few more allies.
Yeah. And when you show, as uncomfortable as it can be, when you show willingness to have these conversations, people will have these conversations with you. I've learned. I do a lot of work with incarcerated survivors, and we have some heavy duty conversations about race and racism, and what exactly that's like. And I don't do it for the thank you, but it's also nice to hear thank you for being on my side. Thank you for listening to me about this. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to have this conversation. And it's like any sort of healing, growth, whatever we want to call it. When you get one little glimpse, it's hard to really look away. It's hard to put on those blinders. I always compare it to the FedEx arrow. Once you see the arrow in the logo, you can't unsee the FedEx arrow. And so I think that's a little bit about what anti-racism work is like. Once you see certain things, you go, maybe this is connected. And it's very difficult to put on those blinders. Maybe this is why this person's acting this way. Maybe this survivor client of mine is being treated like this because she is not white. It happens, unfortunately, and we can't put on blinders to it.
No, in the field you're in, and living up to the SARCC mission statement and some of their vision, you're doing exactly what you should be doing. You're definitely an advocate for these young ladies that you are helping, your clients. You're an advocate for them, and that's part of your mission statement. You want them to know that you're there for them, and the more educated you become about the situation, the better you can help them. So again, I salute SARCC for asking for the workshop, having a workshop, and implementing some of the things that you learned, and starting to have those uncomfortable conversations and being more comfortable about it.
Yeah. Well, it's been an eye-opening learning experience for our organization. And we've also been able to build some really strong partnerships because of this work. I think we've built partnerships in both of the counties that we serve. We've been able to offer some anti-oppression workshops and topics. And one of the things that I've just loved about the ways that this content infuses itself into the rest of the work that we do is that, we learn something in one area and it finds its way to seep into other parts of what we do. So I think about, our anti-trafficking work and building a better understanding of what puts a person at risk for trafficking. And we find, the more that we learn about that, the more that we can infuse that into our prevention programming at the middle school and high school levels so that people better understand risk and bystander intervention and what it means to build a culture and a social norm in a community that promotes, safety, health, resilience, nonviolence, all of those things that we espouse all the time.
And again, it goes back to being educated on those subjects.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I know we could talk just all day long about this topic, and it's certainly the beginning and not the end of the conversation on being color brave. One of the things that we had talked about beforehand was how it could be so valuable for our community to see some concrete examples of the ways that that color blindness or racism impact or influence everyday experiences in the community. And I know Alicia and Miss Christina, you pulled just a few like video clips. And where would you like to start in giving some concrete examples to our viewers?
Let's talk about the mortgage.
Okay.
Because that's going to impact banks, business, and your neighbors.
All right. So while I pull that up, Ms. Christina, would you be able to just talk a little bit about how you found some of these examples?
Well, I had help. I have to give credit to Amanda Davis Bowie. But not too long ago, it was in the news of how people of color were being, quote unquote, cheated out of what their house was really worth. Their appraisals were coming back very low. And one family did a little experiment. They had their house appraised and it came back very low and they knew something was wrong. So an ally came to their rescue, went into their house, took all their pictures down, actually turned into a quote unquote White House, okay? And the appraisal came back, oh my goodness, at least 1/3 or 1/2 higher.
Wow.
So that's when it started making the news. People started talking about it. It was certain banks found out that they were not giving people of color mortgages. Very interesting. So, Allie, that's how we came about these things. It was actually in the news.
Yeah. That's interesting and so scary. But are we ready to show this clip on mortgage discrimination?
Yes, please.
Here we go.
This story started from a very simple question, which was, why is it that 50 years after Congress made mortgage discrimination illegal, is the homeownership gap between blacks and whites greater than it was during the Jim Crow era? And because homeownership is so key to wealth, we began looking at the loan data that's filed under the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act.
So then I went through the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data that lists nearly every mortgage application, trying to answer that question, trying to quantify the relationship between race and being denied a mortgage. As a data reporter, I am looking for stories within the data set, within the numbers. And so the pattern that my analysis established is that people of color are more likely to be denied a conventional mortgage, even when they make the same amount of money, try to take out the same size loan, and live in a similar neighborhood as their white counterparts.
Emmanuel's analysis found that there were 61 cities nationwide, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Philadelphia, St. Louis, Salinas, California, Chico, California, Tacoma, Washington, all over the country where people of color were more likely to be denied a chance at the American dream. And so that was the core that we jumped off on to begin really digging.
And so the analysis established that problem and that story. And so now we needed to go find a face, a voice to this problem. That's when Erin and I started working together in terms of finding the person who could speak to this problem.
We worked with the Associated Press, which helped us distribute and localize the data to newsrooms all around the country. And then we produced a 2-part television series that aired on the PBS NewsHour. We did our own radio documentary. We kept track of the news. There's starting to be a lot of activity around redlining that didn't exist before.
Cities are doing public and private partnerships to give the applications from people of color a second look so that they're not wrongfully denied, to the fact that 6 attorney generals are opening up investigations.
We really wanted to be engaged and active in getting that information out there. Because the fact of the matter is, in today's world, it's not only about the quality of the journalism you do, it's also about your ability to communicate that information effectively to the public.
I think the importance of the Selden ring, especially to a story about discrimination, I think it adds more attention to the problem, puts a spotlight on it even more, and all in hopes of bringing more change.
The Selden Ring Award is a huge honor, and to have an institution like USC and the Selden Ring say, no, this is something that is also of value. We value the fact that you put in this time and you had this impact. It makes it so much easier for us to go out and do it again.
Allie, do you have the video with the family talking?
Is that the California couple?
Yes.
Okay, yep, I have that one. Can show that next.
Thank you.
It's certainly no secret that home ownership is the pathway to building wealth in America. But what's hard in the Bay Area is even harder for some.
And tonight, a look at the growing inequity in home ownership rates in the Bay Area. ABC 7 News race and culture reporter Julian Glover has the story of a Marin couple who almost got cheated out of $500,000.
You know, I mean, it was work, but it was exciting.
Paul and his wife, Tanisha Austin, felt like they captured a slice of the American dream in 2016 when they purchased their first home together, this original Marin City pole home. But it wasn't without challenges.
As soon as like a house came on the market, you go in, you put your bid in, and then you get outbidded by like 100,000 or more rather quickly. And that can be, you know, a little bit depressing.
They bought the home off market from another black family hoping to make homeownership a reality for a young black couple. After moving into the home built in the 1960s, the Austins staged major renovations, adding an entire floor and more than 1,000 square feet of space, along with a deck, new floors, a fireplace, and new appliances. Then they got it appraised.
I read the appraisal. I looked at the number. I was like, this is unbelievable.
The family tells me the appraiser was an older white woman, and they're convinced race was a factor. The home appraised for $989,000, just $100,000 more than the Austins got it appraised for before they started the work, despite $400,000 in renovations.
It was like, you know, it was a slap in the face.
The Austins immediately called their lender and pushed back. After a month of escalating their complaints, they were approved for a second appraisal. When the day came, they got creative.
We had a conversation with one of our white friends, and she was like, no problem, I'll be Tanisha. I'll bring over some pictures of my family. She made our home look like it belonged to her.
And it worked.
So it appraised for 1.482.
Yeah.
Which was 50% more than what it appraised for by a couple weeks prior.
Almost 1.5, $500,000 more.
The Austins were outraged and believe this is another ugly result of larger systemic issues.
There are implications of the ability to create generational wealth or pass things on if our house is appraised for 50% less than what is valued at.
We know discrimination is in nearly every aspect of the home buying process, and really we need to be addressing it as an industry.
Discrimination in the housing market comes in many forms and has a long history in our country and in the Bay Area, leading to alarmingly low rates of Black Americans owning their own home. Black home ownership lags across the country, with less than half, only 44% of Black Americans owning their own home in 2020. Compare that to 74% for white Americans. Looking at the Golden State, just 34% of Black Californians own a home. In the Bay Area, those numbers are even lower. Just 33% of Black San Francisco residents own a home, compared to 61% of white San Franciscans. The numbers are more drastic in San Jose, with a Black home ownership rate of 31% and a white home ownership rate of 65%, more than double.
Why are we seeing such a great disparity?
There's still problems in the housing industry of Black people being steered away from white neighborhoods, even though that is technically illegal, or Black people not having the same access to mortgages that white people have.
According to the National Association of Realtors, Black applicants are rejected for mortgage loans at rates 3 times higher than that of white applicants. Another factor suppressing Black home ownership.
African Americans have nearly double the amount of student loan debt than we see for white home buyers. So that's just one of the many hurdles that African American home buyers are really strapped with and holds back their buying power.
And the pandemic has made things worse. The representative from NAR stressed closing the homeownership gap is essential to closing the wealth gap in our country. To make that happen, equity in housing and access to affordable homes must be the central focus. The Austins agree.
If we are aware that implicit bias exists in other systems, police, school, why wouldn't they also exist in the housing market? And then what can we do to, fix that?
There could be help on the way in the form of two Biden administration proposals. The first would extend $15,000 in down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. The other, a $100 billion fund to update existing and create new affordable housing. Covering race, culture, and social justice, Julian Glover, ABC 7 News.
Thank you, Allie. So you see these experiences everywhere. The young lady mentioned if it's in your schools and other places, why wouldn't it be with your home ownership and mortgage?
Okay, I see that we have a comment in the chat pod. So we've got, but did the appraiser lose her license? So kind of questions about what are the impacts and what kind of accountability happens in larger systems when it seems pretty clear that there's systemic racism at play. And Mr. Davis also talks about how there's local issues that show up in his personal experience. Talking about having to send white faces to a board meeting to help with zoning, knowing that as a developer, he might not get approved if he shows up himself. So those are just some experience that's being shared in our Facebook page. What are some of the things that we think we can take away? I know the couple that we looked at, they talked about their experience in California, but Mr. Davis is saying this happens locally. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that showed up when we first started these conversations at SARCC, folks, especially in Schuylkill County, talking about like, well, we grew up here and there's just not a lot of population of people of color here. So we don't think we're underserving or underrepresenting. And sometimes that perception of the historical way that a community looks, it kind of rips you out of the reality of what the impacts of discrimination, of bias can be in the community. And one of the things that I was sharing with staff recently, we're looking at the differences in census data for Schuylkill County from even 10 years ago. The number of Black, of people of color, and Latino community members who are showing up in Schuylkill County census data has gone from maybe 2% of the population up to almost 10% of the population. Mm-hmm. So there's a growing, changing, and shifting demographic, and one that we need to be talking about if we're going to better understand how to create a safer community. So Alicia, Christina, do you want to weigh in on any of the local impacts while I check out the comment stream here?
Sure. I mean, I think one thing that, I think we've not mentioned yet so far is, the example. I love this. I love the mortgage, the appraisal example. I love it. I love it. I love it. And that's in an area that's pretty wealthy. I mean, mm-hmm. I don't know anybody whose house would be appraised for, $1 million. Like, whew, wow. But, there's so many intersections. There's intersections of margins when we have these conversations and we talk about this work. And I remember one of the anti-oppression trainings they talked about the margins of the margins. Mm-hmm. And one reason why people should be invested in this work is because when you guarantee the rights for the marginalized, you guarantee rights for yourself as well. And not to say we should be self-centered or selfish in that thinking, but I like that. I like that when we serve the margins of the margins, there's greater likelihood of equity for everyone.
And Alicia, we do these things not just because it's the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. Because as you're speaking of the margins, it's definitely the smart thing to do.
Yes. There's I listened to, I was telling Christina and Allie that I was listening to a podcast that had Melody Hobson, and it was like an hour long, and I think she actually used that exact sentence.
What's that?
It's the smart thing to do.
And I listened to her, so I might have got it from her and it's in my head.
It may have been in the back of your head. Yeah.
And I encourage anyone and everyone who's listening, if you have the opportunity, just go to YouTube and put her name in, and you'll see the different interviews she has done. Because the one that Allie was showing the clips from, it's about 14 minutes, and we didn't want to shorten its entirety. But she also does an interview that's an hour and something long, right, Alicia? You looked at that one.
Yeah, it was I forget the podcast name, but it was an hour long, and they talked a little bit more about her background. And she was just a really fascinating speaker. I'm not financial minded at all, but she was really a really interesting speaker for sure.
And one of the contributes to that because she lived it. She's living it.
Yeah.
Yes. And she talks about her growing up, and a lot of things she talked about. I can say, yes, I know. I lived it. I lived it as well. That's why it's so important to me now to educate and get the word out, because I don't want my grandchildren to have to live through the things that I lived through.
And I think what we're just trying to do on staff, I mean, the educational aspect is incredibly important, and just trying to be a little bit more mindful of our actions, of what we do, of our feelings, of our behaviors, etc., not just as people and people and professionals. Things. What this means is things like, I don't know, when we're posting on Facebook, making sure that we have diverse photography for our Facebook posts. I know we do prevention education with kids, and a lot of our books include more diversity. I know Clarissa showed us a book where it was about bodies, and I was really excited because they were not, white skinny bodies. Like, I appreciated that. I respected that. So we just try to do just different things. I know I have a big rainbow flag behind me, and a couple of weeks ago, I had a client, and when she was leaving, she whispered, she's like, "Thank you for that. Like, I liked that. I could see that." And I'm like, okay, like, oh, you're welcome. But how small of what this is, this is just kind of nothing to me anymore to have this rainbow flag, but it meant so much to people. So we try to be mindful of
exactly.
Those.
Yeah. And it's those little things that we can do that we might think, what did I do, that has the biggest impact.
Absolutely. So I know we had talked about some of the really practical ways that this can serve our community, make our community stronger. Are there any other thoughts about practical and concrete ways that our community will be stronger if we take a color brave mentality? It
will be stronger because I think you have more unity. And with that unity will come strength. So that in itself would make the community stronger. Just having that, again, education, understanding, awareness, and the action.
Absolutely. And we got to start somewhere, and if not now, then when? Like Allie mentioned, like, our demographics are changing in a good way. This is wonderful. So if demographics are changing, maybe we have to change a little bit.
We have to. And demographics also changing within your school district. So our educators in school need to know what's going on. They need to educate themselves so they're better prepared for the diversity that they are facing and will be facing.
Yeah, I remember that being one of the biggest things that came out of there was a series of race and discrimination-based town halls that were facilitated by Schuylkill County's Vision. It's probably almost 2 years ago at this point. They sent out a survey just assessing in the community, what are your experiences, your everyday lived experiences with discrimination? And they asked about it from the perspective of race, of gender, of income levels, like all kinds of different experiences with discrimination. And it was actually, I think, experiences that people reported in school settings that seemed to be school and workplace is what came up over and over and over again. And the people who shared comments or shared in the town hall sessions about their personal experiences and what it felt like to not be seen or to experience difference in treatment, difference in, punishment, in expectations set forth, things that, on the surface, it might seem small, but in the grand scheme of things, it's chasing people out of our communities. It's creating an educational environment where people feel unsafe at times. And those are the everyday lived experiences captured through those town hall meetings. I don't think it's through bad intention most of the time, but if the majority of us who have good intentions around making our community safe and welcoming can begin to see these things and make intentional and mindful changes to help, bring the margins to the center, as Alicia was talking about, it can only make our community stronger and safer.
Absolutely. And it's really difficult, not impossible, but it's hard to heal where you've been hurt.
Especially as a child, because it grows with it. Yes, it stays with them. It can be very damaging.
You have a bad experience in school. Well, in first grade, that's going to be your mindset in second and third and fourth and fifth, et cetera, et cetera. If you have a bad experience at work in one workplace, you're going to assume that it's going to happen in the next workplace. And I could see why that assumption would happen.
Alicia, can I quote you on that? It's hard to heal where you've been hurt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please do.
So I'm hopeful for the school districts, even here in Lebanon County or Schuylkill, that they reach out after acknowledging they need some help. So hopefully they reach out to get the education they need for their teachers so they can better serve the students. Because it's very diverse. These schools are becoming more and more diverse each and every day.
Yeah, and diverse in a lot of different ways. It's diversity of culture, of background, of race, of religion, of sexual orientation and gender identity. And the more that we learn, the better we'll do for young people and for our community as a whole. So I know we wanted to end this conversation on a note of laughter and give some ideas for what moving forward looks like. Do you both feel ready to share the college humor link that you picked out? Okay.
Yes.
Man, there were so many incredible, super diverse movies last year.
Diverse movies?
Yeah, like Moonlight or Lion, and figures and fences, movies that didn't just feature white people.
So interesting. I never really thought about that.
Really? Even after the whole Oscars so white thing and all the articles written about it.
Probably crazy, but I just don't see race. I guess I'm just the least racist person here.
Okay. Race is often a pretty obvious thing to observe. It's not racist to notice.
I have to laugh. Zach, my goodness. I only see one race.
Ugh.
The human race.
Such bullshit. You're only telling yourself that so you don't have to think about racism or confront your own prejudices.
No, I'm not prejudiced, okay? I don't even judge Scott for being a woman.
I'm a man, Katie. You know that.
No, honestly, I just guessed. This is going to sound nuts, but I don't see gender and I don't see sex. I just see people.
You don't see how men and women look different?
No, I just see, shapeless blobs walking around.
Okay, and if one of those shapeless blobs were pregnant, you would then know that it was a woman.
To me, it could just be a heavy-set man who has a big watermelon stomach. Okay, I just am so committed to equality. equality. I'm just a good person.
Unless you're blind, you can tell that people have inherent differences.
Oh, I wouldn't know if I was blind or not because I don't see disabilities. I'm not a monster.
So if someone were in a wheelchair, you wouldn't be able to see the wheelchair.
I have never seen a wheelchair.
Never seen a
I
wheelchair.
don't know what a wheelchair looks like.
If someone were in a wheelchair, you would not install a ramp in your building.
I would refuse.
What if someone was missing a limb?
It's perhaps tucked under their little butt.
If someone were deaf,
Talk to them as if they could hear.
why are you so proud of yourself?
Okay, well, here's a thought. Maybe you don't get it because you have less experience on Earth than I do.
Experience? We're all older than you.
I'm sorry, but I don't see age.
Oh, come on. You're telling me if there was an old woman and a baby, you wouldn't be able to tell which one's older? One of them's called an old woman. It's in the name, Katie.
No, because I believe in equality, and I believe everyone is the same age.
That's not what equality means. You have two older brothers. Can you at least acknowledge that?
Yes, and I believe both women are my same age.
Oh my God. What about your parents? How old were they when they had you?
I think they are both ageless and every age at the same time.
Jesus Christ, Katie. What else can you see?
Pretty much everything. Baldness, for example.
So Bruce Willis.
Is he bald?
He's famously bald.
I had no idea.
Katie, why are you doing this?
Guys, come on, okay? I just want to be able to do and say whatever I want, whenever I want, and I don't want to have to think about the world's problems.
Actually sounds pretty good. I mean, I guess I can understand that.
Good way to live.
Hi, it's Katie Maravich from College Humor. If you want to subscribe, click over here. And for more fun stuff, click over here.
The sad thing is we have a lot of Katies. There are a lot of Katies. So
No offense to the Katies out there.
no, not at all. Not at all.
And it's, it's such a lighthearted, funny video, but it has a really good point, and I love that video. I send it to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. So what sticks out to you about that video, Alicia?
Well, the fact, there's a perfect example of what colorblindness is. When you're pretending like, oh, I don't see color. Okay. But you do. I don't see ability, but you do, and you have to. And that doesn't make you a bad person for acknowledging these things. It makes you a person for acknowledging these things. It makes you a person with diverse experiences and wanting to learn and open-mindedness to see those things. And I am a huge advocate of things like this, of podcasts. I talk about TikTok way more than somebody my age probably should, because there's actually really wonderful examples out there, in social media, again, whether it's YouTube or Instagram or, wherever of a lot of this work in progress. And my hope is that, each generation that there's a little bit more progress and a little bit more progress. Because I know when I first went on Facebook, I don't know, in early mid 2000s, whenever that was, never in a million years did I think that people were going to be posting things like this. Never in a million years, I never thought that there would be a Black president in my age, and I'm not like really old. I never thought that gay marriage would be legalized. There's so many things that I didn't think could happen, and it has. So, imagine what some of these conversations might be like in 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to say, because we've been talking about racism and colorblindness, I want you to know that being conscious of someone's color does not mean you're racist. It means that you do see them for who they are. A lot of people, I'm colorblind because I'm, as she said, I'm the least racist person, but color conscious does not equal racism. So just remember that.
Yeah, I think that's an important, it seems maybe so simple to say, but growing up in a predominantly white community, I think there's some misconceptions that to see or acknowledge a person's race, identity, skin color that it is inherently wrong or bad to do. And what the flip side of that, or the way that we maybe would re-examine or reimagine that, is to understand that it's a part of a person's identity, and that seeing that whole person and being open to hearing about their lived experience, it helps you know and be with someone more fully and completely.
True. Yeah.
Great. So we've got some comments. I'm just going to read. Deb Joyner tunes in. She says, to say I don't see color is dismissive. The color is a good thing as a personal identity. What is unwanted is the discrimination. So it's not the seeing color that's the problem. It's the behavior that sometimes follows that is violent, harmful, disruptive, and hurtful.
Yeah.
So thanks, Deb, for weighing in on that. All right. So I know we said we would really easily fill an hour for this conversation, and we are running up against the first hour of this discussion. Is there anything else that we want to talk about our way in? I know we wanted to end on how this work feeds into SARCC's mission. And Alicia, can I turn it over to you to kind of sum up, what does this mean in the everyday experience of our mission to prevent sexual violence and promote healing in our community?
Well, it's all about, okay, so it's good that we've come from a place where, like, okay, well, let's add the blocks. Okay, that was progress in itself. Let's not pretend it's not, because it was, but we need to go above and beyond that. And that picture is, I like this. I use this actually with some of my clients sometimes. Here's what happens when we all have the same supports. Yes, we're being treated equally, but are we really, is there really equality here? Versus, okay, well, let's make the playing field a little bit more level. Let's give different supports. Well, everyone can kind of see. So again, better, not best, better. And there we have our third picture. Let's kind of break down some of these barriers. Let's see what else, let's be open-minded in this. And there's the example of the systemic barrier has been removed. I noticed before there was a comment Pamela Walker had mentioned about that was about the appraisal of the house. Solutions were reported were like the 4-foot block being offered rather than removing the obstruction. That's a wonderful example. So thank you for that, Pamela. Absolutely. And that's, I think, a good kind of explanation of what we mean by equality versus equity.
Okay, well, thank you for that explanation. And Alicia, thanks for being a part of our staff at SARCC. And Ms. Davis, thank you for coming in as a facilitator to help our staff further understand and do this work for social transformation. One of the values that we hold is this social transformation value. And it's this idea that we have to break down barriers and systems of oppression for all. And it's for so many different reasons. It's that oppression or bias that exists in the community increases risk for sexual violence, increases risk for perpetration of sexual violence. And I think when we have any kind of bias or discrimination in the community, it teaches the tools that you need to be able to perpetrate violence against another human being. And that's really the root that we're trying to get at and to root out in our work, because there's not a single person that works at SARCC, works with SARCC, volunteers for SARCC, attends the SARCC program, who wants to see this continue to happen. We work for a time when we're eliminating violence, and that includes violence based on race and discrimination. So I want to give one more thank you to Ms. Christina Davis from Strength, Love, and Motivation for joining us for this discussion and for being a part of our community of social transformation advocates at SARCC. I want to thank Alicia Rothoski as a sexual assault counselor, aspiring ally, and a leader in this work for our organization, and for being one of the only other SARCC staff members who is willing to get on camera for SARCC. It is hugely helpful, and we're really glad to have you here. And I think the community is glad to know that there's more than just me out there in front of cameras for something. So we're really glad to have you and your pride flag and your ideas. We encourage all of you who are tuning in to share this, to get the community more involved in this conversation, to understand that intent and impact are two different things. There's a great quote that Amanda pointed out. Seeing color doesn't mean you're racist. It means you're seeing the whole person. So I'm going to try to capture that and post it as a comment here by Ms. Christina Davis. And then we also want to invite you to tune back in for future Schuylkill Strong series discussions. So the next one is going to be, we have an in-person mandated reporter training that is planned for May 3rd. And there are credit hours that go toward licensure associated with that one. So if you're interested, please tune back in for that. We are glad to have you tuning in and watching today. And please continue having these hard conversations in your community, because it's only going to make our community stronger. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and thank you all for being a part of this.
And Allie, I want to thank you for the opportunity, and thank you, Alicia, for the work that SARCC is doing.
Yes, and thank you, Christina, for you and Amanda putting on a great training for us and really having some good dialogue. And thank you, Allie, for leading us that way as well.
All right, have a wonderful day, folks.